Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. In life, there are love stories that begin like sweet dreams but end as inescapable nightmares. Today's protagonist is Yang Yang, a young woman once praised as the brilliant flower of Peking University in China, a flight attendant whose beauty and education were the envy of all. But a chance encounter on a flight would steer her life down a dark path no one could have predicted. Yang Yang was born in 1976 in the city of Harbin. However, her childhood was overshadowed by the constant arguing of her parents. The tense relationship between them didn't stop at mere disputes. Sometimes it escalated to violence. Witnessing these scenes day after day, young Yang Yang's tender soul was deeply affected. This unstable family environment silently shaped her extremely perfectionist and stubborn personality. Even the smallest details could make Yang Yang restless and uncomfortable. If her mother braided her hair with even the slightest height difference between the two sides, she couldn't rest easy until it was fixed to perfection. The persistent arguments finally shattered her parents' love completely, leading to an inevitable divorce. After the family broke apart, Yang Yang and her mother moved to Xiamen to start a new life. Growing up in a single-parent household forged her incredibly independent and determined character. Once Yang Yang made a decision, she would persist to the end, regardless of anyone's attempts to intervene or persuade her otherwise. Perhaps not wanting to see her mother struggle alone and wishing to share her burden, Yang Yang decided to live in a dormitory shortly after entering high school. After graduating middle school, she chose to attend a vocational high school, where she became a shining star. With her perfectionist nature in everything, Yang Yang always achieved excellent results, excelled in many fields, and was elected student body president. Additionally, she had been naturally beautiful since childhood and grew even more gorgeous and charming as she matured. Truly a standout figure at school. The vocational school Yang Yang attended had a partnership program with Xiamen Airlines. In 1993, she participated in the flight attendant selection process. With her natural advantages, she stood out among over 2,000 candidates, successfully passing all selection rounds to become one of 30 chosen applicants. After professional training, in 1997, with excellent results in all evaluation exams, she officially became a flight attendant for Xiamen Airlines. This prestigious job with attractive pay filled Yang Yang with passion. She devoted herself wholeheartedly to her work, serving passengers attentively and gently, striving to shine in her role. Before long, her outstanding performance was recognized and highly praised by management. She was selected for the model flight attendant team. All these achievements helped her win the title of Top 10 Outstanding Flight Attendants at Xiamen Airlines at just 21 years old. However, this talented and beautiful flight attendant with a bright future ahead would encounter the man destined to change her entire life. In the flight attendant profession, interacting with countless passengers daily was routine, but they were usually just people passing through life's journey. On that flight from Beijing to Xiamen, Yang Yang was performing her usual cabin patrol duties with her familiar attentive service attitude. But one male passenger caught her attention. This man appeared very friendly with a bright smile, continuously pressing the call button, sometimes asking for coffee, sometimes requesting soft drinks. When it came time to fill out the passenger feedback form, he even pretended not to know how to fill it out to get Yang Yang's help, using this opportunity to ask for her phone number, saying it would be convenient for future consultations. Though Yang Yang was young, after several years of working in society, she completely understood this man's intentions. However, following the principle that the customer is king, refusing outright would embarrass him. Seeing his persistent pleading, Yang Yang considered for a moment and decided to write down her number. After leaving the plane, Yang Yang didn't consider this worth worrying about. But the man frequently texted and called, inviting her to meet for meals. Yang Yang only politely called back once, using her busy schedule as an excuse to decline his invitations. Through these exchanges, she learned the man's name was Chunlin, residing in Beijing, and due to his business nature, he often traveled to Xiamen for work. Throughout this time, whenever Chunlin was in Xiamen, he would call Yang Yang. Meanwhile, Yang Yang thought that since he lived in Beijing and she in Xiamen, they couldn't become friends. Even ordinary friendship wasn't necessary. Therefore, aside from that initial polite phone call, no matter how many times Chunlin called, Yang Yang had no further contact with him. During this period, Yang Yang truly had no time to pay attention to Chunlin because she was diligently searching for prestigious universities. After years of effort in her career, despite doing the flight attendant job that many people dreamed of, Yang Yang still felt unsatisfied. She realized that her secondary education level would somewhat become a barrier to future career development, so she desired to continue her studies to improve herself. With her decisive personality, Yang Yang quickly set her sights on Peking University. She was determined to temporarily set aside her thriving flight attendant career to study at Beijing Normal University's Continuing Education Institute, majoring in business administration. Once again returning to a university environment, she treasured this valuable learning opportunity. At school, Yang Yang studied very diligently and got along well with her classmates. Her classmates all noted that she was beautiful, had a perfect figure, loved ballet dancing and sports, but wasn't fond of partying, dressed simply daily, and was even chosen as flag bearer during Peking University's centennial celebration. However, this peaceful life was suddenly shattered by an unexpected phone call in 1998. This was Yang Yang's second semester at Beijing. That day, she suddenly heard the dormitory guard from downstairs calling up, "Yang Yang, there's a phone call for you." She went down to answer. On the other end came a "hello," a voice both strange and familiar. After a few seconds of searching her memory, Yang Yang suddenly remembered the caller's name, Chunlin. This made her feel somewhat unsettled. A full year had passed since their first meeting, but this person was still persistent and hadn't forgotten her. After chatting, she learned that Chunlin had been continuously calling her throughout this time. Before coming to Beijing to study, she had left a message machine in Xiamen. When Yang Yang's mother saw Chunlin's messages, she called him back. Chunlin was ultimately someone with business experience, elegant in style and sincere, generous in attitude, leaving a very positive impression on Yang Yang's mother. Therefore, she provided her daughter's dormitory phone number to him. This phone call created a major turning point in Yang Yang's view of Chunlin. He was no longer a nameless stranger in her eyes, but gradually became quite impressive to her. Chunlin didn't miss this opportunity. The very next day, he drove his Mercedes-Benz straight to Peking University to meet Yang Yang. In a later interview, Yang Yang described that meeting in an extremely romantic way. She said that when she walked out of Peking University's gate that day and saw the Mercedes-Benz parked by the roadside, she had an intuition that it was Chunlin's car. That day, he dressed very elegantly, even meticulously applied cologne, his entire being emanating the demeanor of a classy gentleman. He held a bouquet of fresh flowers in his hands, his face beaming with a smile as he walked toward her. Although later many articles described Chunlin as a perfect CEO, in reality, Yang Yang was 5 feet 7 inches, while Chunlin was only 5 feet 6 inches, and he was 10 years older than her. Nevertheless, in conquering Yang Yang, Chunlin truly put in tremendous effort. Daily flower deliveries, chauffeuring in luxury cars, going to upscale places together, not to mention to have opportunities to approach her, he even registered for English classes in Beijing. Though he ultimately only attended 2 sessions, this was enough to gradually move Yang Yang's heart. After all, such a wealthy, mature, and ambitious man was exactly the ideal type that countless young women dreamed of. In their daily conversations, although Chunlin didn't deliberately emphasize it, he skillfully implied that he was still single. He once told Yang Yang, "People my age have mostly already married and had children, but do you think I look young? Not like a man in his 30s? From then on, Chunlin became Yang Yang's closest friend in Beijing. During free time without classes, she often went out with Chunlin. When feeling unwell, the first person she thought of calling for help was Chunlin, and he was always ready to set aside all work to immediately take her to the hospital for care. Later, Chunlin gave Yang Yang a personal pager. Since receiving this gift, Yang Yang was always in a state of waiting for his messages. But this time, 3 whole days passed without any news from him. This silence made Yang Yang restless and uncomfortable to the point of being unbearable. It was then that she suddenly realized she had fallen deeply into the web of love. Chunlin, with his wealth of life experience and deep understanding of female psychology, had controlled her masterfully. It wasn't until Yang Yang's birthday that he took her to a 5-star hotel in Beijing, where he had prepared 9,999 bright red roses. This scene moved Yang Yang to tears, and she threw herself into his arms. From here, the two officially became lovers. The next day, Chunlin messaged Yang Yang to come find him at Roman Garden apartment complex nearby after class. When she arrived, Yang Yang learned that to be closer to her, Chunlin had rented an apartment there. Especially that day, quite a few of his colleagues and friends were present, meaning he was officially introducing Yang Yang as his girlfriend to everyone. Chunlin told her, "Living conditions at the university dormitory aren't very comfortable. Move here to live with me." Yang Yang was already deeply in love with Chunlin, so she moved to Roman Garden, beginning their life together. This period could be considered the sweetest and happiest time in their relationship. However, as Yang Yang's studies in Beijing were nearing completion, she had to face the decision of whether to return to work for Xiamen Airlines. Standing at the crossroads between love and career, due to Chunlin's persuasion, Yang Yang ultimately decided to give up her flight attendant profession and choose to stay in Beijing to become his woman. Also at this time, Yang Yang's mother married a Canadian man, and she intended to take her daughter to settle abroad. But Yang Yang refused. She continuously lost such good opportunities, gradually losing herself and sliding downhill without brakes. As time passed, Yang Yang began to notice unusual signs about Chunlin. When making phone calls at home, he always spoke in the local dialect. Although Yang Yang didn't understand Fujian dialect, she could still make out words like child and business trip. Even though Chunlin made calls in front of her, sometimes his eyes seemed evasive. Based on a woman's instinctive intuition, Yang Yang felt Chunlin was hiding something from her. However, despite her suspicions, Yang Yang didn't directly confront Chunlin, but instead tried to probe the household helper. This helper was also brought by Chunlin from his hometown in Fujian and knew quite a bit about his circumstances, but the helper always spoke hesitantly, avoiding questions, only telling Yang Yang that Chunlin was a good person and she should feel at ease being with him. This way, Yang Yang could almost certainly confirm her suspicions were correct. He definitely already had a wife and children back in his hometown. For Yang Yang, Chunlin was her first love. She couldn't accept this deception and was determined to confront him to clarify everything. When exposed, Chunlin immediately became extremely agitated, even crying bitterly. He explained to Yang Yang that he and his wife had lost their feelings long ago and only hadn't decided to divorce because they currently had a young child. He also told her that before meeting Yang Yang, he had another girlfriend who was a fashion school student, but later she fell in love with someone else and left him. He swore to Yang Yang that he would definitely divorce his wife to marry her, continuously emphasizing that all responsibility belonged to him. He had been the deceiver, and Yang Yang was completely innocent. Although these explanations sounded very forced, Yang Yang was still moved by his tears. This conversation took place right in the car, and Yang Yang's mood, like the steering wheel in Chunlin's hands, made a big turn in a completely different direction. The initially sweet and happy life, after this sudden steering, entered a completely different reality full of pain. Not long after, Yang Yang became pregnant. At this time, she felt scared because it was her first pregnancy, and she didn't want to use this to bind her partner. So after discussing with Chunlin, she decided to have an abortion. However, this also made her feel extremely frustrated. Although Chunlin took care of her very attentively at this time, in her current role, she still couldn't consider it a legitimate relationship. Therefore, she issued an ultimatum, demanding that Chunlin divorce within 1 to 2 years to resolve their relationship once and for all. During this period, Yang Yang, with her restless mood, often picked fights with Chunlin for no reason. But generally, he tolerated her. Time passed until Chinese New Year 1999, when they both went to Fujian for the holiday. Yang Yang made a final declaration to Chunlin, forcing him to resolve his family situation during this new year, either divorce his wife or break up with her, Although Chunlin made promises, his expression showed extreme worry. On the 29th day of the 12th lunar month, he came from Fujian to Xiamen to meet Yang Yang. After they met, Yang Yang once again reminded him that he must be honest with his wife. Chunlin clearly still lacked determination. After all, he and his wife had a young child together. Seeing Chunlin still hesitating when he was about to drive back to Fujian, Yang Yang offered to see him off part way. As they were about to get on the highway, Chunlin saw that she still had no intention of getting out of the car, thinking she wanted to go to Fujian together to clarify this matter. This made Chunlin uncomfortable. Actually, with her stubborn personality, Yang Yang initially had no such intention, but when he said this, she truly became angry, insisting on going to Fujian together and forcing Chunlin to call ahead to tell his wife. Chunlin was also in a fit of anger at this time and actually made the call, telling his wife, "My girlfriend wants to come meet you." Receiving such a sudden call, his wife completely didn't believe it, thinking her husband was joking with her. However, when they actually arrived in Fujian, Yang Yang lost all courage to meet Chunlin's wife. After spending one night at a hotel on the 30th day of the 12th lunar month, she took a bus back to Xiamen alone. But before leaving, she reminded Chunlin once more. And this time, Chunlin finally honestly told his wife. When his parents learned of their son's unreasonable behavior, they were extremely angry, and the entire New Year passed in a tense atmosphere. As soon as New Year ended, Chunlin hurriedly brought Yang Yang back to Beijing. Unexpectedly, as soon as they arrived, Chunlin's parents followed right after. They used the excuse of coming to Beijing for medical treatment and moved into Roman Garden. But their real purpose was to come see their son's mistress. Chunlin's mother strongly disliked the woman who had broken up their family and also opposed her son's divorce. During this period, there was even the Rolex watch incident. One day, Chunlin's Rolex watch suddenly disappeared. Chunlin's parents suspected Yang Yang had taken it, and even Chunlin himself didn't completely trust her. Because of this, the two had a cold war for over a month. This incident hurt Yang Yang very deeply. In the latter half of 1999, Yang Yang conceived the idea of studying abroad. This way, she could have time to calmly reflect on the troubles in her romantic relationship. Her parents strongly supported this decision, and Chunlin didn't object either. In April 2000, Yang Yang went to Switzerland to study hotel management. She thought she could find peace, but Chunlin's phone could ring at any time. Yang Yang studied while working, living right at the hotel where she interned. If she turned off her phone at night, Chunlin could call from the first floor of the hotel up to the 6th floor, calling each room one by one until he found her. Just in Yang Yang's first month in Switzerland, Chunlin's phone bill reached over 30,000 yuan, about $4,500, and whenever vacation time came, Chunlin would call urging her to return home, saying he missed her very much. So while her classmates used vacation time to travel everywhere, Yang Yang always flew home to reunite with Chunlin. Although most of the time they felt as sweet as newlyweds after their separation, her unofficial status always made Yang Yang feel uneasy. She also discovered that Chunlin gradually developed bad social habits that she couldn't accept. For instance, some of his business partners were accustomed to extramarital affairs, and he normally frequented unhealthy entertainment venues for business. Once when Yang Yang hurried back from Switzerland, she caught Chunlin in a karaoke room being intimate with a hostess. She angrily threw a glass at Chunlin, but Chunlin felt that this action had made him lose face and upset his clients. On the way home, he hit Yang Yang's head with a brick, requiring her to go to the hospital for 3 stitches. Later, Chunlin told Yang Yang that he had bought a house in Beijing using his wife's name. He explained this was because the house was restricted to internal sales, while he had Hong Kong residency. His parents also suggested that once Yang Yang returned to Switzerland, they would have his wife and child come live in Beijing. Yang Yang understood clearly. This meant they wanted the couple to rebuild their relationship. She felt that forcing Chunlin to divorce was basically just a pipe dream. Each time she returned home, they would be extremely loving, but then she would turn around and leave, and he would return to his wife and child. This was something she absolutely couldn't accept. This time, after Chunlin saw her off at the airport, she was determined to end everything herself and prevent Chunlin's wife from coming to Beijing. She changed her flight ticket to Switzerland to 3 days later, then secretly changed direction to Fujian. Yang Yang knew Chunlin's wife was applying for Hong Kong documents, so she called pretending to be a staff member handling the procedures, saying preliminary health checks were needed. Then she brought mercury extracted from 10 thermometers and went to Chunlin's home, forcing his wife to drink part of it. Then she gave her a pregnancy test stick to hold in her mouth. After waiting a few minutes and seeing no unusual reactions, she forced her to drink the remaining mercury. After finishing, she hurriedly left the scene and returned to Switzerland. Later, Chunlin's wife felt something was wrong and called to tell her husband about the incident. After hearing his wife describe the woman's appearance, Chunlin immediately guessed it was Yang Yang. He quickly told his wife to go to the hospital for examination. Test results confirmed mercury poisoning. Fortunately, because timely emergency treatment was received, no lasting damage remained. Although Chunlin persuaded his wife not to report to the police, the relationship between him and Yang Yang had completely frozen. From then on, he began avoiding Yang Yang. Yang Yang also felt desperate and planned to go to Canada to continue her studies. In April 2001, Yang Yang returned from Switzerland to apply for a Canadian visa. Although Chunlin had distanced himself from her, they still contacted each other occasionally, and Chunlin often helped her with visa procedures. However, at this time, they were no longer living together. During this period, Yang Yang rented her own place. On the night of June 27th, around midnight, Yang Yang came to Chunlin's door. She knew that due to his business entertainment nature, Chunlin usually came home late, typically not until midnight. Sure enough, at exactly midnight, Chunlin arrived home. Seeing Yang Yang, he asked, "Why are you here?" Yang Yang replied, "I want to see you, I have something to tell you." Chunlin coldly said he had work in the morning and told Yang Yang to leave. But Yang Yang refused to go. Chunlin reluctantly opened the door, and they both went inside. Once in the house, Chunlin didn't pay much attention to her and went into the bathroom by himself. Yang Yang heard him seemingly talking on the phone with some girl. She was extremely angry and told Chunlin that she also had a boyfriend, along with other deliberately provocative words. Chunlin, in his anger, had sexual relations with her. After the encounter, Chunlin fell asleep. Looking at him sleeping soundly, Yang Yang couldn't fall asleep. In her mind, like continuous film reels, all the memories of the two of them over the years appeared. Then, thinking about Chunlin's phone call earlier, she took his phone to look. Perhaps the noise woke Chunlin. Seeing this scene, he was extremely angry, snatching back the phone while scolding Yang Yang. Then he even grabbed a knife and lunged forward. In the critical situation, Yang Yang struggled to grab the knife but accidentally stabbed it into his stomach. Yang Yang immediately pulled out the knife, and both of them froze. Facing each other for a few seconds, Chunlin shouted for help and continued struggling for the knife with Yang Yang. In the chaos, Yang Yang stabbed him over a dozen times in the neck and chest, until finally both were completely exhausted. Chunlin said to her, "Go away, I hate you," and breathed his last. Yang Yang replied, "I'll take you with me." She dragged his body into the bathroom, cleaned all the bloodstains in the room, and washed the bloodstained sheets and curtains in the washing machine. Then she used garbage bags to wrap the knife along with bloody towels and tissues, drove Chunlin's car to dump them in a trash bin in a nearby residential area. Afterward, she returned to her rental place, got a large trunk, and went back to Chunlin's house. But this trunk still couldn't contain Chunlin's body, so she had to go out again to buy a larger suitcase nearby. However, when she returned again, she heard that the housekeeper had already called the police. So she quietly left the scene. She went to a nearby hospital to treat wounds on her hands and also changed her residence. On October 8th, while applying for a visa at the Canadian consulate, Yang Yang was discovered and reported, then arrested by police. Because before leaving Chunlin's house, Yang Yang had taken his phone, watch, and other belongings, and also drove away in his Audi. Therefore, she was charged with 2 crimes simultaneously: intentional homicide and theft of property. On September 9th, 2002, The first trial sentenced Yang Yang to death. She didn't accept this verdict and filed an appeal. On August 8, 2003, after comprehensively considering circumstances such as Chunlin's deliberate deception of Yang Yang and other factors, the judge changed the sentence to death with a 2-year reprieve. Looking back at everything, Yang Yang's tragedy didn't just lie in those fatal stab wounds on that fateful night, but stemmed from her stubborn clinging to a love that was never meant for her. She thought she was fighting for happiness, but in reality, she was only leading herself into a dead end. And finally, when the curtain of this love affair closed, all that remained were blood, tears, and a predetermined verdict for her entire life. And that's today's case. What are your thoughts on this case? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.